When did you decide your gender growing up, or was your gender just assumed? Defining what is gender seems to be all over the news and social media platforms lately, especially with the numerous transgender legislative bills being proposed in the United States, elite sport organizations establishing their gender policies, and parents choosing to raise babies. Does this mean the end of gender is upon us? Not quite, but it does mean that we need to know how to talk about gender with our kids. I'm Kathleen, and I make videos for parents on how to have the modern day sex talks. Theybies refers to infants and toddlers whose parents actively choose not to associate a gender with their child's reproductive anatomy. Parents of Theybies are finding that by disassociating a gender with their child, they're giving their child the space needed to explore without gender stereotypical limits. In the book Raising Them by Kyle Myers, Kyle and their partner explore what it was like to raise a Theyby named Zoomer. By the time the book was published, Zoomer had yet to identify their preferred pronouns. And then on the last post on Kyle's Instagram page about raising Zoomer, Kyle shares that they do regular pronoun check-ins with Zoomer, and one day, around Zoomer's 4th birthday, Kyle asked Zoomer, "What pronouns are you into for yourself these days, Zoomer?" And Zoomer responded, "I love he, him." Now, we have no idea what reproductive anatomy Zoomer has, but he has clearly told us his gender by about 4 years old. And this corresponds with the research out of the Mayo Clinic stating that kids will be able to identify their gender identity between the ages of 3 and 6 years old. And that's without ever having a formal conversation about gender with anybody. But Kathleen, isn't talking about gender and what are pronouns going to confuse my young kid? Dr. Myers shared in their book, Raising Them, that Zoomer was aware of gender and gender pronouns, but it didn't create confusion. It created dialogue. It allowed for conscious wording about the difference between one's reproductive anatomy and one's gender. It also brought to the forefront gender stereotypes that many people unconsciously associate with infants and toddlers upon finding out their gender. When talking to our kids about gender, it's not really a conversation about the reproductive anatomy of a person, but it's more about pointing out what gender stereotypes are and how someone would choose to express their gender. It's about letting them know that they can shop in all sections of the clothing and shoe stores. They can play around with their hairstyle, makeup, and accessories. And they can explore all the different types of activities and toys and find out what they prefer and really like. By pointing out what are gender stereotypes and discussing how people express their gender, you're giving your child loads of different options, and then you're observing them. Observing what they choose and then asking them why they've chosen it. Observing how they feel when they wear a specific article of clothing. Observing how they refer to themselves. Kids aren't going to be confused by what they like and who they are. What's going to be confusing is if you say to them, "No, you can't have that," or "You can't play with that," or "You can't wear that," and then you insert some gendered reason. Parents, how do we know that we are not harming our kids by all this gender talk? I'm going to pop in here real quick and say if you're finding this video to be interesting, go on and give it a like or leave a comment. We know that kids have a sense of their gender identity by the age of 6. And according to the CDC, over half of LGBTQ adolescents experienced poor mental health in the past year, and 1 in 5 attempted suicide. But researchers out of the University of Texas at Austin found that LGBTQ adolescents experienced fewer depressive symptoms when they felt they had supportive parents. As a parent myself, I want what's best for my kid. I don't want them to feel depressed or so depressed about themselves that they have suicidal thoughts. And if that means having a few conversations about gender and acknowledging that not everybody feels extremely masculine or extremely feminine, and that gender is on a spectrum, I will absolutely have those conversations and continue to encourage parents to do so as well. But what if your personal, religious, or cultural values do not allow for recognition of individuals that are beyond the binary of masculine and feminine? If you identify as that type of parent, you can still share those values and beliefs with your child after you have defined for them what is transgender, cisgender, non-binary, and gender fluid with them. Providing the factual information for your child ensures that they are aware, educated, and informed, so that if they meet a person with they pronouns or hear about transgender legislation in the news, they already have an understanding as to what that means. Now, for me personally, I didn't raise a baby. I assumed the gender of my children based off of their reproductive anatomy. but I haven't shied away from conversations about gender with them. And then I realized I kind of already do regular pronoun checks with them, but I just haven't been calling them that. So far, they're happy and well-adjusted kids, even with all the gender talk.